Yes, you can go to a kids' church if you're wanting to do that. And even of appropriate age, you're welcome to do that. So I'm going to do something I've never done before in the 6 years I've been here or preaching at any time. I'm going to go backwards to a part of the text that we did last week. Never done that. Always moved along on any Bible. So I'm going to nerd out today. For those of you that are true nerds, I'm going to certainly nerd out today. So I may lose some of you. But I'm warning you ahead of time. And if you fall asleep, just pray, okay? Just appreciate it if you pray. So I just pray that you are as blessed as I was this last week, just diving in the Word. Let's give this time to God. Thank you for the beauty and the depth of your Word, God. Thank you for speaking to us. Help us to walk in obedience. Help us to continue to see how wonderful and beautiful and big and loving you are. You are a good God, and thank you for wanting everyone to come to salvation. Thank you for your shed blood. Thank you for the beauty of the gospel, that you came to this planet, that all of the fullness of God dwelled in you, and that you are the head of the church, and that you created all things for you and by you, and that you're reconciling everything back to you. We love you, God. In Jesus' name, amen. So, force and pressure tend to drive us places that we normally don't go. You know that when you're under pressure, whether it's emotional or physical pressure, you end up in places that you're not normally comfortable with. And it tends us to we tend to make decisions based upon some of those pressures. And there's decisions that we sometimes make that we would have never made if we were not under pressure. So I thought about the intensity of this, especially during this weekend, of the force and pressure that came from an excerpt from a book that I was looking at called Scars and Stripes by Captain Red McDaniel. Red McDaniel was an aviator for the Navy, and he was flying his 81st mission when he was shot down in Vietnam on May 1966. And here's a tiny bit of his story that he wrote down in his book. A day after his capture, Red McDaniel was hauled off to the infamous American prison camp in Hanoi, the Hanoi Hilton. He rode in the back of a small pickup truck next to a 50-gallon drum of gasoline that spilled on him every time they hit a bump. So the trip was excruciating, as he had to be treated for cracked vertebrae and other broken bones from the ejection. He was tossed into a cockroach-infested cell, interrogated immediately upon his arrival. "You talk now, medicine later," they told him. And when he refused to give nothing more than his name, rank, serial number, he was tied up with ropes and bound so that his arms were stretched behind his back and his shoulders were ready to pop out of their sockets. He said, "I pretended to pass out several times in hopes that they would untie me and leave me alone." He wrote on the first day as a prisoner of war. "But they were wise to that. At times I would bite my shoulder hard enough to transfer the pain from one area to another. Then I began pounding my head against the wall, hoping for some blood that would have some liquid to ease my terrible thirst. We were eventually fed watery soup with leafy greens in it, just enough to keep us alive. Those first 5 days are burned in my memory. In between meals, the interrogations return. Question about the Navy's new walleye missile, new targets in Hanoi, and to satisfy his captors, McDaniel began talking, not about valuable information, but instead false information. And after the 5th day, he was taken to another room and released from his leg irons. I was put into solitary confinement for 8 hours, and I began to get some sense of the horror that was ahead of me. I knew that I was up against some monstrous situation, against an enemy who seemed to take great satisfaction in inflicting pain, who performed like robots in doing it. Morale was essential, And one of the keys to morale was to beat the enemy as often as possible in their attempts to keep us isolated. He knew his fellow prisoners knocked on walls, on pipes, on the floors. They wrote on toilet paper with dirt from the floor. And it was really to have camaraderie during these times in this environment. And it would also give some people purpose. But I was also the biggest optimist in Hanoi, he said. When guys would tap down to my cell, I asked when are they going to go home, I would always answer every single time, 2 months. And after 6 years of that, I lost some credibility. But that was my livelihood, to truly believe that answer, that one thing that they could not take away from me was my faith in Jesus. Next day, more of the same. Fan belt beatings, arms up, spending the night sitting on a stool. By Tuesday, McDaniel's knees were infected with kneeling on the concrete. The guards continued to beat him, this time with bamboo sticks, if his arms dropped below his head. Halfway through the week, McDaniel confessed that his room was the of the escape plans. It wasn't. Confession brought him an hour of relief until the officers figured out that that was a lie. The torture continued, and on the 5th night of beatings and no sleep, he became sick with infections. He had a fever of 104. So much came out of those wounds that whenever I moved around in this small room, there was a trail of pus that was left behind on the floor. The torture reached its peak on the 6th night. McDaniel wrote in his book that he became irrational and grabbed a guard and began yelling at him. Probably not a great thing to do. The commotion attracted other guards to the interrogation room, and they tied his arms up again with ropes this time, pulled him up from the ceiling to where he was 2 feet off of the floor. At one point, his arm snapped in two. He said, "You've broken my arm." "No, we have not broken your arm. You have broken your arm." Next day, they tied damp cloths around his arms and around cords hooked up to a battery. The electric shock treatments went throughout the day. He recalled the pain as blinding but merciful, as I was tired, so that it only was a blurring dimension of pain that I already had. Mind you, this excerpt that I've taken out here, I've chopped and chopped and chopped. It would be the entire time this morning. So this is an edited version. The final beatings came on Friday. This is his first 5 days. This is the only part I was giving you. 120 licks with a fan belt, passing blood in his urine, ruptured eardrum. He couldn't take it any longer. He told the officers what they wanted to hear, but none of the names, none of the things he gave them were real or true. But for the torture ceased for now. After a week of brutality few men could endure, McDaniel looked to God and he thanked him. That Friday night, I slept for the first time in a week. I was mistaken to think the interrogations were over or the torture was over. But as I slept, I had the assurance that God was not far outside of this hell. If I had to go on with this nightmare, then I surely would, but nothing else mattered, was to please God in my walk. Now, I read that because it's hard to imagine such pressure and pain. And again, this is just a very small synopsis. It's just a few snapshots of what he endured out of the book that he wrote, Scars and Stripes. Yet there is such a force, there is such pressure that I'm going to share with you today that is unexplainable to modern scientists, to physicists, to chemists, and specialized nuclear physicists and particle elements. I'll get to that in a moment when we nerd out. First, I just want to repeat one thing. Jesus is the creator of all things. He created everything. He was in the beginning. We know from this text that we read last week, he is pre-existent to creation. We established that last week. We remember in verse 16, it says this, "For by him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, both visible and invisible." As we said last week, there's a whole lot more that's invisible than there is visible. Whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities, all things were created by him and for him. The keys to this I've already pointed out, but the big picture is this, that he created everything. To make this as big as possible includes all things on earth, all things in heaven, all things visible, and all the stuff that you can't see. Every throne, every ruler, every power, every authority, every king, every president, every dictator, every despot. He created all things. The good and the bad ones that ended up turning their backs on God. John 1:3 emphasizes the point of this creation. Through him, Jesus that is, all things were made. Without him, nothing was made that has been made. A very poetic way for God to say, there's nothing that you see or can't see that God didn't touch. He made it all. John and Paul both agree with Moses, who wrote Genesis 1:1, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. They all agree together that Jesus was part of this creation. If Jesus created all things, visible and invisible, all rulers, powers, and authorities, then it stands to reason that he created them to himself and for himself, to bring glory to himself. Every time that we look at anything in creation, especially that we discover or wonder at, we go, wow, God. Every bit that we see, every waterfall, every rainbow, every cloud in the sky, and the stars and the galaxies in the universe. Jesus is the ultimate end user in all of this, which leads us to the truth that, secondly, Jesus holds all things together. We know that from verse 17. This little bitty baby verse that's listed here in verse 17, he is before all things, pre-existent, and in him all things hold together. Now, I ended up reading a small illustration last week in my studies that I told you that I started writing some notes on and ended up filling a page from that one, and I'm going, oh, I can't put it in here. That'd be too long for last week. And now I'm going back to that one page. He holds all things together. It's a simple truth, but it's a truth that is bigger than most of us think. Now, speaking of pressure, speaking of force, there are 4 major forces in the universe when it comes to physics. 2 of them we're pretty familiar with. Gravity, electromagnetism, the strong force, and the weak force. If you've taken physics or particle physics or nuclear physics, you've probably heard of these things. Most of us know about gravity and electromagnetics. The Earth is governed by the magnetic north and magnetic south poles to create a geomagnetic field which protects the Earth from all kinds of stuff. We know about magnets from our science class. You remember these, right? You put the poles opposite one another and they attract. You know what happens when you do the reverse? There's this weird thing, as a kid you would go, how in the world does that, you can't put them together. Now you get the stronger the magnetism, the more that you know that you can't put these things together. They just want to go to the opposite. And that's the way magnets work. So we've played with them, we've had fun with them, and you know that if you ever had one of those race cars that you had a long magnet in it, like the bar magnet, and you can actually make it go with wheels on it. Very cool stuff. Anybody who grew up who played with magnets, it was just fascinating world, because what you saw was the result of that, but what was happening in there was all invisible. So, remember the red and the white horseshoe magnets? Remember those? They would put a N and an S on them. Electromagnetic powers so much of our energy. AC units, stoves, refrigerators, cars, mowers, and even electric barbecue rotisseries. Gravity is a force which keeps us on the ground upright. It also tends to break things when you drop them. Really tends to break things when you have tile. It makes things fall out of the sky that are trying to stay up and they fall down. The sun's gravitational pull holds all the planets in our universe together. The gravitational pull of the sun makes everything orbit just right. Millions and millions of systems in our universe are all held together by Jesus. When we think about the macro, we think about everything in this universe The electromagnetism, the gravity, the gravitational pull that happens not only on our planet, but in the sun, the rotation of the planets, and then in every other galaxy, as far as the eye can see with all the telescopes and all the machines that we haven't seen the edge yet, because we're still in discovery. We think about the tides, the currents of the oceans, the weather patterns, the seasons, and the right gravitational pull at every single level. It's the right gravitational pull, all held together by Jesus. This verse, one verse, Jesus holds all things together. Now, we think about gravity, we think about electromagnetism. There is a force that is stronger than any of those, and it's called the strong force. As I said last week, much of the discoveries of the sciences have been revealed mostly in the last century due much to newer technology. We have better telescopes, we have better microscopes. We can see things that we haven't seen in all of creation before. The strong force was first beginning to develop and understood by the physicist Ernest Rutherford. I believe he was Canadian, maybe, who researched atomic and nuclear physics. And in 1908, he discovered the nucleus of an atom. I mean, we've just always assumed that there's always been atoms, but it's not always been clearly known that that was true. And if you keep that up there a while, I'm going to talk about that just a little bit. In 1911, he discovered the basic structure of an atom. He found that an atom had positively charged nucleus. That's what he knew in 1911, surrounded by rotating negatively charged electrons. Then, in 1917, he discovered that the nucleus wasn't just one blob of a nucleus. It was made up of several positive protons. Then in 1937, it was discovered that there was also neurons mixed with the protons to make up the nucleus of an atom. These are all things years later continue to be discovered going, oh, that's what that is. So the entire makeup of the atom was discovered, the entirety of it, less than 100 years ago. As we know, atoms are the fundamental building blocks of all matter, seen and unseen, gases, metals, everything, human body, the sun, all the stars, everything is made up of atoms. Each element on the periodic table is separated by the number of protons in each of the nucleus. You know, I forget all this stuff, But you look at the atomic number, that's the number of protons in the nucleus. So they're all separated by number. The first one, helium, starts with 1, and then it keeps on going down to get to whatever that last number. Those of you that are nerds know what that last number is. It's around 120, 118, something like that. And so they're broken down into gases, metals, heavy metals, different, all types of stuff. And so if you're into chemistry and physics and all that stuff, you would know this table. When the first one was discovered 150 years ago, I think it had about 15 to 20 different elements that they had known and discovered. This is what we know right now. So before you think I may be going too geek on you, I really want you to hang in there because this is still all about Jesus. So, if you don't mind not checking out just yet. So here's the point. We know by Coulomb's law of electricity, those of you that have been shocked just already know that electricity exists. If you've ever changed the switch and go, I don't need to turn off the breaker, you know what I'm talking about. Ow! I'll remember that until I forget to take it off again. But the nucleus, when you talk about electrical charges, it's just like going back to this. When you talk about protons and electrons, protons are positively charged. Electrons going around it are negatively charged. So opposites attract, right? When you think about the basic structure of an atom, they shouldn't work like they work when they've been observed. They should work like that. So the reason why I say all this is because these discoveries, physics would show that because of electromagnetism, that if you had a nucleus of protons, who cares about the neurons because they're just neutral? If you had a cluster of protons, it's a big deal. Maybe not so much with helium because there's only one. But you get up to something that's much bigger that has 98 protons in it. You think about this just a moment. The physics would say that these protons are flying apart. if you go back to the charge of electromagnets, they should be just flying apart. But they are held together in one nucleus, all these protons. So you get into one of these bigger elements, and that's a massive amount of pulling apart that should happen. They should be flying apart. Now, it was thought that most of last century that scientists and nuclear physicists called this force, I kid you not, cosmic glue. How does this stay together? Because the electrons on the outside are negatively charged. What does a negative and the positive do? They should just be touching. But this is flying around here. The protons packed together in a nucleus should be flying apart. And yet they're stuck together. And you know what they called it for a long time was cosmic glue is holding this atom together. Now, they've never been able to explain it. It wasn't until in the 1970s that this force was first observed, and then they renamed this strange phenomena the strong force. That's what scientists call it today. The strong force holds the atom together. No matter how many protons are in there, packed together, they are not flying apart. Now, may I say this? Scientists cannot explain it. They don't understand it. They know its origins by the law of physics, but they can't figure out how or why it exists. They just know that it's observable and that it exists. To explain briefly, just briefly, if you put two protons together, they would repel naturally, pushing away at one another at 8,000 miles per second. That's just two protons. So if you go up to a uranium, which is 92 protons, a proton on the surface of that would be repelled at 70 pounds. Now, that doesn't sound like much for you and me. I've lost 100, so I know 70 doesn't seem like a lot. But when you're talking about something as microscopic, that is an incredible amount of weight. To fly together two protons that are touching together, they would fly apart at 8,000 miles per second. That's the force of what they should be repelling at. Now, what holds protons together without flying apart? Physicists call it the strong force. It is the force that holds the protons together. That force is 100 times stronger than electromagnetism. That force that's holding that together. And 10 to the 39th power stronger than gravity. That, for those of you that like those kind of numbers, that's 100 million times stronger than gravity. Scientists, physicists, chemists, nuclear, subatomic scientists, all scientists cannot explain the strong force. They don't know why or how it exists. They just know it does because it's been observable. And it's been observable just in the last 45 years. Colossians 1:17 says he holds all things together. All things, everything is held together by Jesus. Every human being, all of us, our blood, bones, skin, organs, hair, the animal kingdom, the plant kingdom, the dirt, the air, the metals, the gases, the planets, the stars, the atmosphere, everything that we see and don't see is held together by this thing that they call the strong force. And Colossians 1:17 just says, he holds, in him all things hold together. Those of you that know who Jesus is, you already know what the name of the strong force is. Jesus is the creator. He is God. He made gravity. We don't float away. We are not crushed into the earth. We just have the right gravity. You know, one of those things that's amazing, if you've ever done snorkeling or scuba diving, you know, if you really go super deep, you have to do the whole pressurized thing so that you don't bust your eardrums. So you start to go below sea level in the ocean, you add the pressure of atmosphere, of one atmosphere at 33 feet of descent. That's called hydrostatic pressure. As humans, we can safely go down about 130 feet deep. And that's about 4 times the pressure of our atmosphere. That's actually before serious damage can occur or death. Yet God has created a pressure that pushes back, hydrostatic pressure, with a much greater force. You know that you have to push back something if you have that much force coming in. So we know at this point there's deeper places in the crevices and the trenches. At 20,000 feet, we have observed animals down there. That is a pressure of over 600 of our atmospheres. And you're just going, how do they live? There is enough pressure somehow coming back that way that pushes back against the hydrostatic pressure that they don't get crushed. I mean, we can't go past 130 feet. Yet Jesus holds all things together, all the elements, all matter held together by Jesus, the strong force, Jesus. The atoms of the sun, yeah, I'm sure there's quite a bit of atoms in the sun, held together by Jesus. All the stars, all the burning balls of gas, held together by Jesus, all of them made up with atoms. Our bodies, the seats we're sitting on, the building we're in, the electromagnetism, not only running the lights, the AC, the screens, the sound, but all the air that is around us. The right mixture of oxygen and nitrogen in the air that we breathe. He is holding all those molecules that we breathe in and the carbon dioxide that we breathe out. He's holding them all together. Ever think about this place, what it would look like if Jesus simply let go? If you just let the physics part of that with this strong force that science says is holding every single atom together, it's such a great force that is known as the strongest force in the universe. It is hilarious. If you watch YouTube videos of physicists doing this stuff, we don't know what it is, we just know it is. And they can't put a name except strong force. And you want to say, Jesus, I know who that is. I know the name of the strong force. Holding everything together. We kind of know that at the simplistic level when we look at the universe or we look at gravity and the simple stuff that we know. But when we start to look at the atoms, then it's just mind-blowing to think that everything is held together by him. So if you think about everything being let go, and I don't want to get too weird, but I'm going to give you a verse just to think about. This is enough for me to go, maybe, yeah, okay, so I'm going to read it anyway, because it's in the Bible. If Jesus took his hands off this place, 2 Peter chapter 3, that was really good. That's exactly what I expected. 2 Peter chapter 3, verses 10 through 12. But the day of the Lord will come like a thief. The heavens will disappear with a roar, or also known as a great noise. The elements will be destroyed by fire, and the earth and everything in it will be laid bare. Since everything will be destroyed in this way, of course, this is the point of this verse. What kind of people ought you to be? Peter asked. You ought to live holy and godly lives as you look forward to the day of God and speed its coming. That day will bring about the destruction of the heavens by fire, and the elements will melt in the heat. Now, what does that sound like? It sounds a little bit like a nuclear explosion. Now, we've always thought about this in our day and age of hiding under desks and those kind of big mushroom cloud things to be able to go, oh, that's probably what's going to happen. Like, this is an explosion on a cataclysmic scale, a massive scale. You're not talking about the planet now. You're talking about all of matter, the entire universe, all the stuff that we can't see, and all the way to the edge, whatever that edge may be. Now, just to give you an example, when the atomic bomb was researched and drawn up before World War II, and they first detonated in the desert of New Mexico in 1945, some of the preliminary thought was that the exploding nature of the bombarding of the nucleus with neurons would cause the separation and explosion of these protons to continue to explode and keep on going way past New Mexico. So when they were knowing the beginnings of the science of this, going, wait, if these things fly apart, especially just two protons at 8,000 miles per second, the putting this bomb together has the ability to destroy everything that we know here on this planet. Now, we know, we're still here, that didn't happen. But because of their understanding of science, they were trying to go, man, this is pretty risky. We're willing to take the risk and bomb New Mexico before we bomb anything else. The end result is that it did not happen. There was a stopping point. When Jesus lets go, there is no stopping point if he lets his hand off of everything. Now, Peter describes, I believe, a result of Jesus letting go and the elements of the universe repelling at each other at a massive cataclysmic scale, that the entirety of the elements melting with fervent heat and being completely destroyed. Sure sounds like a real possibility of the strong force not being there. We, however, look forward to a new heaven and a new earth, so we don't live with fear. How ought you to live then? Peter asked that question. Well, we look forward to the day of Jesus' return. It's a completely different matter, if you will. I know, sorry, it just happens. We look forward to the day of Jesus' return. We don't have to be biting our nails and have our blood pressure going up. Oh no, what if all the elements are destroyed? And Peter says that will happen. So, why is it important to know that Jesus holds all things together? First, it reinforces the sovereignty of God. Jesus is massively in control of the most minute and grandest of all things in the universe. So therefore, if he is at the most minute scale of every atom holding them together, every element, everything that's on the periodic chart, can then we trust him with our lives? If he is holding all things together at the smallest and the grandest of scales, to be able to go, I don't know if I could trust him with my life. He is the master of the universe. He created everything by his word, and he is holding it together. They know it is a strong force. Secondly, Jesus holds this body of Christ together. This body is not held together by a nice building, good location, above average preaching, great teachers, wonderful servants, generous givers, faithful workers, or just the fact that maybe most of us get along. It's not held together by that. It's held together by Jesus. The body of Christ is held together by Jesus. Why? Because we're different people. We come from different places, different thoughts, different philosophies, different reactions. Jesus holds us together by the blood of Jesus. It's him who holds all things together. Leadership is held together by Jesus. Think about leaders. What is typically true of leaders? Typically, they're strong. They're able to push back against one another. Leadership in a fallen world has the ability to have egos, clashes, pulling apart, to tear apart one another, to fight. So what keeps leadership in the church together? It's only Jesus, that we can come together with our different ideas, our different perceptions, understanding, denominational backgrounds, philosophies. It's only Jesus that keeps weird, different people together in unity. It's Jesus that holds us together. Lastly, and not lastly just because I could make up more lists, but in our list today, marriages. You get two unique people who think differently, like a man and a woman, and put them together for the rest of their lives. What holds two people with different gifts who think differently, who have the greatest possibility to fracture, pull apart, and explode? It's only Jesus that can hold a marriage together. On your own strength, boom. But together, Jesus holds us together. I just want to say, in a very short amount of time, Jesus holds all things together. He holds us together as worshipers and followers of him. Our natural nature is to be selfish, narcissistic, ego-driven, unforgiving, unaware, and looking for answers outside of ourselves. That's our natural nature. Do you know that we still come in with that because we're still in these fleshly fallen bodies? And we have this renewing of our spirit through the renewing of our mind to connect us with God, to continue to not behave in a way that our natural selves want to act. And so we're dying all the time to self, as Romans 6 says, dying to ourselves so that we can be held together in his hands as servants working alongside one another, people who are many times radically different. I have been friends and deep friends with people that I strongly disagree with because of Jesus. And that has always superseded differences. That the bond that we have, and I would probably say that most of you are not like me. That's a good thing, especially on the diversity scale. But because Jesus can hold us together in difference where you go, oh, opposites attract. Well, in the magnetism world, it does. But in the body of Christ, it's happening all the time, only because of Jesus. What holds us together? It's Jesus. I thought about a couple of songs, but I'm not going to do them all. There was just so many, and I've scratched so much out of the sermon because it was going to get into a big old science lesson, and I didn't really want to do that. And I thought, oh no, somebody's probably going to snore. And boy, oh boy. So there you go. He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the whole wide world in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands. I was thinking about that like, okay, that's going to be really campy after a big scientific sermon. But then I was thinking about Rich Mullins' song. And everywhere I go, I see you. Everywhere I go, I see you. And everywhere I go, I see you. Everywhere I go, I see you. Everywhere. One of the reasons he wrote that song was just because of the difference of things that he would see. He would notice, like, who is the dude that discovered the green, that there were like 200, 300 shades of green? It was an artist. Yeah, so it was that guy. So anyway, he had painted and tried to recreate with mixing colors together to go, I wonder how many shades of green is. And that's why Rich wrote The Color Green in one of his albums, because he must like the color green because he made so much of it. And there's just green everywhere. But there was like 200, 300. One of the famous painters, I don't know if it's Van Gogh, somebody like that, painted all this green. And to be able to see, wow, in everything that I see, everything, everywhere I go, I see you. I can't get away from your creation. And so he wrote that song. And so, oh, there was another one. Oh, here it is. Yeah. Now, this was written by a guy named Andy Simmons. And he is the worship leader, creative artist guy at Summit Church in Orlando. And he wrote, actually, a song. I'll probably send you guys a link this week in the newsletter. But he wrote this song, and I'm going, this is actually out of the text of Colossians 1. It is so good. Everything holds together. Hold us together. Everything holds together in you. Everything holds together, Lord. Hold us together. Everything holds together in you. You are the first. You'll be the last. So meet us in the middle. Sometimes we feel so little. You are the head. We are your body. We walk in your direction, finding our perfection. Everything holds together. Hold us together. Everything holds together in you. Everything holds together. Hold us together. Everything holds together in you. So those are just a few of the songs I was thinking about. All of them, obviously not on a full album scale, so you can do all that on the internet. I'll give you sources on that. But I'm just thinking, when you think about the minutest of scales of Jesus holding everything together, I think it can blow your mind when you just look at something like the strong force and gravity. He made all that. It's unexplainable if you don't know Jesus, but then, oh, I know Jesus. That makes sense. What Paul wrote about 2,000 years ago, we're really getting to understand just in the last 45 years. He's always held it together since the very beginning of time. And one day, yeah, all this stuff is going to melt with a fervent heat that we can't, You think about being hot in Florida during this time, and as the summer comes, this kind of fervent heat is something that I can't imagine things blowing apart that much. I don't know that I can explain it, and I don't even know if it's just this nice illustration of Jesus letting go. But it sure, when you talk about the universe, not the world, the universe, then nothing will be left. The elements, all elements, will be destroyed. Since everything will be destroyed in this way, what kind of people ought you to be? You ought to live holy and godly lives as you look forward to the day of God and speed its coming. That's how we live. We live in a state of expectancy of Jesus' return. So we don't live with fear. We don't live with, oh no. We live with a holy God who holds all things together. He's the author and finisher of our faith. The gospel makes it clear that we're dead in our sin against a holy, perfect God, that he came in the flesh, that he sent his son, and he went to the cross, he shed his blood, and he took our place, that whoever would believe in him, that they would have life and have it to the full, to the abundance. So surrendering our lives to Jesus, confessing Jesus as Lord, following in baptism. If you need to do that today, to the great, super awesome force of the universe, you're welcome to come forward as we stand and as we sing together.